As you know, we have been taking Season 5 of Cold Case Christianity to examine the 25 most popular objections that are offered either to Christianity, to the belief that God exists, theism, to even to religions broadly. And any of these, I think, could effectively stall a conversation. Because let's face it, certain things foundationally have to be in place in order for Christianity to be true. Number one, we have to have a proper definition of what truth is. Because if there is no objective truth, and there is no objective truth about God, we have to have good reason to believe that God exists. Because if God doesn't exist, then there's no God of Christianity. Then we have to have good reason to believe that Christianity is an accurate representation of the God of the universe, that Christianity is true. So you can see that there are certain levels that have to be in place, certain foundations that have to be in place. And these quick shots, we call these quick shots, these quick responses we have, you can find them on our homepage at Cold Case Christianity. In the writing section, there's a tab there that's called Quick Shots. And we try to release one of these about once a week. And so that will help you to kind of catch up if you've missed or you just want to print these. Remember, everything at coldcasechristianity.com is offered for free, and it is printable and savable. So every single article, for example, you can see at the top there's a PDF save file. You just hit the PDF save file. It'll deliver it to you as a savable, a downloadable PDF file that you can print. So you can start to collect these. I will tell you that before I had a bookshelf, which now I've got other things hanging on the wall, but when I first started as a Christian, I was so investigative in my approach. Every claim that was made by anyone, especially by Scripture, I wanted to examine, and I went after it. I was reading more than I had ever probably read, even in grad school, and I was collecting. This is back when there weren't a lot of apologetics books, but people were starting to write online, and it was very, very early in the internet age. And so I started just hitting the print button, print. I printed reams of paper that I then bound in books, in notebooks, and I had just black notebooks in all of my shelves. Well, that's not a bad way to start because you can get those resources for pretty much next to nothing. Now, I've written 3 books, and my hope is that these 3 books and the kids' books that are part of this trilogy, there's even curriculum for all 3 books. The Curriculum for God's Crime Scene publishes this year. And this is stuff that I hope will help you become a good Christian case maker, because let's face it, if you want to learn this stuff at the level that will make you most prepared, each of us who does this work probably has to take the time to do it in a 40,000 or 60,000 page book. But I also try to write in 500 words an article, and those are all downloadable for free at coldcasechristianity.com. You could actually start to assemble your own collection of notebooks if you thought to do so. But also, we've kind of condensed for our Quick Shot series all of the responses to the top 25 objections into about 150 words. One screen on the phone app. And we have a phone app for this, which is downloadable to iTunes and Android. It's the Cold Case Christianity phone app. And if you download it, you will see that you can get all of our resources on that phone app for free, including our Quick Shots, which are designed to be single screen answers. You're in a conversation, an objection comes up and you feel like quitting, don't quit. Hang on a second, I'll be right back. Take a break with your phone. Pull up the screen that has the response. It's only on one screen right there in front of you. Hey, if you don't even feel comfortable memorizing that one screen to get back in the conversation, say, I have this from a friend, or I have this from a resource on my phone. Can I just read it to you? And it's going to be a very short 100-word response, like almost like a Twitter response or like a Facebook post. That's what it's like. And that may move the conversation forward even if you can't memorize it. And what we're going to do this week is talk about an objection that is very broad. And it's one of those objections that can stop the conversation related to Christianity from ever starting because it precedes Christianity. And that is the objection that, I'm glad that's working for you. And I'm glad that Christianity works for you. But I wasn't raised around anyone. I got lots of friends who aren't Christian and they believe all kinds of things. And I really believe that all religions lead to the same place. That is this week's objection. All religions lead to the same place. So this don't even bother me about Christianity. I'm glad for you that yours works, but whatever I believe. And by the way, I find that this objection is offered a lot by people who don't They would not consider themselves to belong to any classic, historic, religious tradition. But they'll still make this kind of objection, all religion. Now, they don't belong to any other religion, but they'll say that because what they really mean is, and whatever view of God that I hold, what I've concocted, my own micro-religion that's in my head, that will also get me there. It's not as though they're saying, hey, you're a Christian, but I really believe in Judaism or in Islam or in something else, Mormonism. That's not what their objection. Their objection basically is, I want to believe whatever I want to believe about God, and it's going to get me there anyway, because every belief about God, whether we call it a religion or otherwise, gets us to the same place. Really? That is a conversation stopper if you don't know how to move past it. And I think it's important for us to be able to move past it. Now, you may have noticed over the last few weeks of doing these quick shot shows that there is a pattern that is emerging. And the pattern typically is that we are going to ask questions of the people we're talking to. Now, granted, I can't just give you a series of questions to ask, because that's not going to help you, number one, because you know what they're going to say back in response. But I will give you a few. But I have to give you enough kind of meat in an answer to move you forward, even as you're asking questions. But the kinds of questions we're going to ask are important. We're going to ask questions that really help us to define what the problem is first. So before we do anything, we want to define what people mean. What do you mean when you mean all? What do you mean by the word religion? What do you mean by the same place? These are simple questions. We have to kind of define, what do we mean by these things? And that'll help us to provide a response. But what we'll do, first of all, is just recognize that this is not typically something that somebody offers because they are trying to make a case for their religion, because most of the time this is offered by people who do not identify. And by the way, that group is growing. You've noticed by the Pew reports, these are the reports that are being done here in America that measure where people find themselves. Do they claim to be Christians? Do they claim to hold any other religious view? Do they claim to be atheists and agnostics? Or a new category which is growing faster than any other, which is what they call the religious nuns. When asked with whom they affiliate, they say none. None of those religions. Well, it turns out that that group is growing faster than any other group. And that's the group who will offer this kind of objection, because this kind of objection is really to say that whatever I believe, I have got a version of God. To say that I'm not a religious nun does not mean I'm a non-believer. It means I don't affiliate or recognize myself as any of those classic, historic, religious worldviews. I now have my own view of God. Is that true? And if it is true, why are we bothering to make a case for any one of these if they all lead us there? Well, I want to give you a couple ways of answering that really help to kind of parse out what is being said, how you're defining terms, and then kind of ask more overarching views. So let's put the first one up on the screen for you. Here's one way you might respond to this. Okay, so you say that all religions lead to the same place. Okay, fine. Have you really examined all religions? Or are you just making a broad assumption about religion? Let me illustrate what I mean by that, okay? Let's say you're hungry for homemade mushroom soup, all right? If you wanted to make homemade mushroom soup, you're probably not going to go out into your front yard, right, and just pick any old mushroom that happens to be growing in your lawn, right? You're not going to do that. Why? Because some of those wild mushrooms, they look a lot like the kind you see at the market, but look, you might even be able to, they might feel the same, they might chop up the same, they might fit nicely in the soup bowl, and they might even satisfy your hunger, okay? But the one from your lawn, the one from your front yard, if it's just a bunch of mushrooms growing in the grass, that might be toxic. It might be deadly, it might be poisonous. That's why most of us are very discriminating when it comes to mushrooms, right? I mean, that's just common sense. You know, several varieties of mushroom actually lead to death. And in a similar way, some religious worldviews are also toxic. They lead to spiritual death. Why would you be more discriminating about mushrooms than you are about spiritual claims? Wouldn't you want to know the difference between those claims before treating them all the same? Now, what we're trying to do here is provide an illustration to show that, really, a lot of people will say things about spiritual matters that they would never say about any other category in their life. They make decisions about spiritual things that they would never use that approach in making a decision about anything else in their life. They certainly wouldn't pick a car the same way they pick a religion. I've known lots of people who picked their religious system because they sat in a meeting and had an experience of an emotional response that made them cry, and they knew this, they were home. They knew this was true on the basis. Now look, I'm sure that God communicates that way for a lot of people, but I would want to test that. You might have a visceral response to what a salesman shows you in a showroom of a car, but you probably, if you're smart, you're going to check out, the background of the car, its record for trustworthiness, the manufacturer's record over the last number of years. You're going to there's actual websites in which you can search to see if the car you feel so emotionally connected to is really the one you ought to buy. Well, I know a lot of people who spend more time doing that to search for a car than they would to search for a true religious worldview. It's really a matter of us figuring out, well, where are our priorities here? Do we really think that look, if you're picking between mushrooms, you might go online and do some research to see, well, that mushroom, that's the toxic one. And although it looks like the other one a little bit, now I can see the differences. I can go online and take a picture. I'm now spotting the differences between what is good for the soup and what is toxic for the soup. And it's because you have learned the differences between the mushrooms. That's just wise about any time you're making choices between claims. You ought to at least learn the differences. A lot of the times, to be honest with you, people say this kind of thing, that all religions lead to the same place, because they're not aware of the differences and how the differences impact each other. We'll get to that in the next response. But my point is, why is it we are more concerned? Listen, there's a show, and I'll just give it a plug, because I watch it once in a while. There's a show on Fox Sports and a show on ESPN that are just sports. One's called First Take on ESPN. It's just two guys who are at the table debating whether or not this player is the greatest player of all time, whether or not this team is more likely to win on Sunday than not. And they use analytics. They have got all the data. They can tell you the difference between this offensive line and that offensive line, player by player. They have taken the time to research so they can make a wise choice. There are people who are in betting leagues, right? They're in fantasy sports leagues. And if they're either betting with money, which, that's a whole other issue, or they're just betting with their friends for, the bragging rights, they have done the analytics. They have spent time analyzing the differences when they make their choice when they're drafting players. Really? That's important enough for you to, I get it, but shouldn't this kind of thing be important enough also? Most people who say that all religions lead to the same place have not taken the time to understand what all religions teach. So the first question you might want to ask is simply, have you really done that? Do you know everything there is to know about all the religious worldviews? If you do, you probably should be teaching at some university somewhere. Most of us don't know all those differences and all the different details between all those differences. So to make that kind of a claim really implies that you have that kind of level of knowledge. And if you don't, you probably shouldn't say it that way. So this is one, I think, way to kind of move the conversation forward. To say, why, look, you know enough to make choices in other areas. Do you really know enough to make choices, to even make that statement? Because it sounds like you know everything that all religions teach, and you can make this kind of a broad, overarching statement, when in fact, if you're like most of us, that's just a kind of a cliche thing to say when we haven't even examined the differences between the religions. Let's take a break. When we come back, I'll give you a slightly different way to respond. And again, remember, when I'm giving you these possible responses, it doesn't mean that you're going to use one at the exclusion of the other, or that you're going to use one first and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, you're going to use two. No, it means that you're going to think about your context and which of these two responses might be best in your context. So it's important for us to think about, well, is this response going to work given who I'm talking to? You may include both responses and merge them. You may go a third way that I haven't even discussed this week. But whatever you do, I want you to at least have these tools on your shelf, some ways that you've prepared in advance by hopefully in advance. Again, quick shots are designed to kind of be reactive, right? You hit a roadblock and you open up a phone app and you get a response. But man, I would love for you to take the time just to open that tab on the app and just scroll through. They read really fast. You'll find that knowing the answer in advance is really helpful. All right, let me give you a final way, a second way to respond to this claim that all religions lead to the same place. I'll put it on the screen here and I'll kind of walk you through it. So, if someone says to you, hey, all religions lead to the same place, please. Well, you could ask this. You could say, are you aware of the differences between the historic views of God? I mean, there are differences. They don't all say the same thing. For example, Christians believe that Jesus is God, but Jews don't believe that. They're in complete contradiction. Both groups could be wrong, by the way, but they both can't be right, can they? I mean, given that their claims contradict one another. One says Jesus is God, one says he isn't. So you got to either accept one or the other or neither. But you can't say both of them lead to the same place. I mean, Christians believe that Jesus died on the cross and then he rose from the grave. Muslims don't believe that. They deny that claim. Again, both these groups can't be correct, right? I mean, one could be right or the other could be right, or they're both wrong. Christians believe in a personal God, for example. Buddhists don't. They're pantheistic. They deny the existence of a personal God. Again, one more time, both groups could be wrong, but they both can't be right. Why? Because they believe something contradictory. Now, I could go on and on with this, right? I mean, there's no reason, though. The major religious worldviews disagree far more than they agree. It's just the nature of it. I mean, they could all be wrong, or one of them could be right. Why would anyone believe that all religions lead to the same place when none of them agree on essential claims? Now that's the really important part here. The first response really keys on the idea that most people have not examined all the religious worldviews. Okay. The second response tries to help them see, just on a very quick surface, you're going to need to know enough about what is different. And we've written about this at Cold Case Christianity, the unique nature of Christianity compared to other religious worldviews. But you're going to need to know enough about what is different between these worldviews to be able to help your friends see that these differences are not minor. They are major contradictions. They're contradictory claims. So really, if you're going to say that all religions, in the historic, classic sense of religious worldviews on the planet, if you're going to say all those go to the same place, you might as well just be saying because all of them are false and they don't go anywhere. Because they couldn't all go to the same place because they are pointing to entirely different kinds of beings in entirely different kinds of ways. The only way they could all be equally true is if they're all equally false. Now, and look, a lot of the people who are making this claim might be taking that approach. They might actually be making the claim from the perspective of, yeah, I don't believe any of this nonsense. Okay, that's fine. That's a different kind of objection. But my point is that just remember that the claim that everything is equally true when there's this many contradictions between the claim is the equivalent of saying that none of it is true. Because, in other words, if all of it's false, then it's all equally true in the sense that it's entirely false, all of it. And so it's equally, the truth claims are equal in the sense that they are equally false. So my point here is we need to help people see the differences. That means you're going to have to know enough about what's different between what Jews say about Jesus, what Muslims say about Jesus, what Baha'i say about Jesus. Yes, they all use the same word. They will all talk about Jesus. They will all acknowledge his existence, even Mormons, but they will define him in entirely different ways. And the definitions are so dramatically different that they cannot all be right. And it's worth your time to discover the differences because you don't want to put that toxic mushroom in your soup. You want to know if that mushroom you're putting in the soup is the right mushroom. And this is true for everything we do in life. You want to make sure you're using the right key in order to open the door. Not all keys open the door. You want to make sure you pick the right car in the parking lot in order to go home. Otherwise, you're going to get accused of trying to steal someone else's car. It turns out that the singular nature of these kinds of truth claims drive us to be very fussy and specific. But then when we get to religion, we're like, yeah, I don't know. we get a little loose on those kinds of claims because we're uncomfortable. Look, that key that's going to unlock the door, the car you pick in the parking lot is probably not going to make claims about how you ought to be living, but Christianity will. You're asking people, in some sense, to embrace a worldview of submission to the authority of a creator in a world which is more and more in love with autonomy. That's going to be the hardest sell, right? And we're going to help people to realize that, hey, it turns out that living in the truth is the best place to be, the best way to live. But that means you're going to have to weed the truth out amongst the lies, or the truth out amongst the errors. And there will be material errors and material truths you will encounter in your life, and there will be spiritual errors and spiritual truths that you will encounter in your life. And you're going to have to figure it out. Not all roads will lead to your house, and not all roads will lead to God's house. It's time for us to help people see that difference. Okay, hope that helps you to kind of assess this objection, the objection that all religions lead to the same place, because clearly they don't, and I want people to help to see how to respond to that. All right, we'll be back here right next week with another objection and how to respond in a way that keeps the conversation going, again, here next week on Cold Case Christianity.